Welcome, welcome. How are you on this Wednesday evening for me here in Eastern time? So, what do you do when the people you are around don't respect your boundaries? Right? When you have to constantly reinforce those boundaries. And when you do that, right, when you have to constantly reinforce your boundaries, that process is wicked stressful, right? Like it becomes just as stressful as what led you to set those boundaries in the first place. So today we're going to break down how to navigate that battle with boundaries so you can focus on you can focus on your growth, on your work, and not be focused on the people that keep trying to bust through your boundaries. So, welcome back to the Launch Your Business Live, where we make making money online clear, simple, and successful so you can build wealth and independence so you can work from home and turn your part time business into a full time income. So, my name is Marianne Lombardi. I'm the founder and CEO of Marianne Lombardi Coaching. I am an author. I am a single parent of the coolest teenager on the planet. I've been helping small business owners thrive for 20 plus years, and my mission is to do the same for you. So I want to jump right into this. And let's define what our boundaries are first, to start off with. So your boundaries communicate your values, they communicate your priorities and how you want to be treated. And often they're hard to set and hard to enforce because we aren't committed to, or maybe we don't even know what our values, our priorities are, or how we want to be treated in the first place. So your boundaries are impossible to enforce if you don't know why you're protecting your time, what you want your attention on, and how you want to be treated. So, setting and enforcing a boundary is not about just saying no, it is about saying no to something specific, right? So, having boundaries improves your mental and emotional health. It reduces your stress, it reduces your anxiety, and they're essential to your self-care, and they're essential to promoting and building the healthy relationships that you have in your life. Now, I have a previous training on the 3 steps to setting boundaries that stick, and if you want a copy of that, just put boundaries in the comments, or if you're watching the replay, just DM me boundaries and we will send it to you. And it talks all about how you set those boundaries and a little bit about enforcing them. All right. So just let us know. So, setting those boundaries is one thing, but the enforcement is an entirely other thing altogether. And it is often the hardest part. But what do you do if you enforce them but no one's listening? Right? People keep like running over your boundaries. They step on them, they barrel through them. They just aren't giving you your boundaries like a listening, right? Like they're not paying attention. And you've spent all of this time developing them and enforcing them, but people are just walking all over. Now, that walking all over your boundaries is different from this natural learning curve, right? Because there's going to be a natural learning curve when you set your boundaries, because the people that are impacted by those boundaries may not, and quite honestly, will not get it the first time. So they need to learn, and that may take them a minute. If you can think about it kind of like, if you're a kid being told no, what are they going to do? They're going to scream. They're going to say, well, why do I have to do that? They're going to throw a fit. They may try to walk around your boundary and poke at you a little bit. They're going to do that until they learn. But once they learn, they'll stop. Now, hopefully your bosses and your partners and your friends are a bit more mature than a toddler, and so they don't go quite so far as throwing a fit, but there still will be a learning curve involved in it. So the challenge comes when the learning doesn't happen, right? Or the people or the systems or the environment, like your work environment or other environments in your life, they know your boundaries, right? They know they exist, but they refuse to accept them. So there is a compounding effect of continually having to enforce those boundaries when no one is listening, because it zaps your energy. It increases that stress and anxiety. It distracts you from what you are prioritizing, right? That time, that attention, what you want those things on. And it pisses you off, quite honestly, or it can make you feel defeated. So what do you do then? So here are a couple ways to approach that we're going to talk about. Number one, you're going to learn how to reassess your enforcement strategy because there are indirect ways to enforce your boundaries and there are direct ways to enforce them. So we're going to talk about both of those things. You also can identify what you do and do not have control over and manage that. We'll talk about that. And you also need to take imperfect action, right? That's the third step of this enforcement or dealing with people who are running past your boundaries. So let's talk about each of those things. Let's talk about this reassessing of your enforcement strategy. So, as I said, there is direct enforcement. Now, direct enforcement is telling people directly what you will and will not accept, what you will and will not do. It is saying no, right? Or it's telling people why something is or not going to fly with you. So, for example, declining events or activities that you don't want to attend or things that take too much time away from what your actual priorities are for your time and attention. So, for example, a script might be, thanks for the invitation. I won't be able to make it at this time. Have a great event. Or you could say to somebody, unfortunately, I won't be able to take on that responsibility right now. And if they press you on it, you can say, I have other things to do at that time. If they continue to press you, you can change the subject or say, I have already let you know I can't participate. I'd be happy to talk about, make something up, XYZ. But if not, I look forward to reconnecting after your event or activity. Right. So the key to direct enforcement is thinking about that script beforehand, right? Like when you script it out, what you would say to common situations that you find yourself in, you're not going to be caught off guard without something to say. And you can and often when you're caught off guard, you resort to saying, yeah, sure, or yes, when you really want to say no. So definitely script that out, right? And if you need help with any of your scripts, if you've got like common things that people ask you or say or invite you to, and you really need a script for that, like DM me and let me know. Like I'm the script queen. I love scripts. So I'm happy to write some for you. The next thing is to practice those scripts. And it might seem silly, but like seriously, stand in front of your mirror and say the scripts out loud to yourself because you're just going to get better at it each time you do that. So that's an example of what direct enforcement is. Now, indirect enforcement is still proactive, right? You're still doing something, but it is about using other tools and strategies to protect and manage your time and attention. And the key to this is to use the tools you have without excuses, right? Just use them. Turn off your notifications, put your phone on silent, close the door when you want to be alone. Now, this seems simple, but they're wildly effective and people just don't do it, right? They are wildly effective to hold your boundaries because you don't need everything beeping at you. You don't need somebody walking into the bathroom. You don't need people wandering into your office when you're trying to get something done. You just don't. So also, you can remove yourself from the environments and from around the people where the boundaries are being pushed. And it can be as simple as eating lunch in a place that is quiet or where people can't find you and ask you to do things, right? Like if people bombard you or find you, at certain parts of the day to ask you to do stuff, just make sure you're somewhere different. So don't spend time with the people who don't respect your boundaries. Now, there will be some people that this is harder to do with than others, like partners and bosses and kids, etc. But there are a lot of other people in your day-to-day life that do run over your boundaries that you can spend less time with, right? Like that coworker who is always, wants to know your life business and you just don't want to have that conversation. Or the parent, at school who won't stop pushing you to participate in activities that you just don't want to and you just can't do. And we all have like a cousin or some sort of family member who says stupid shit or asks you inappropriate questions. So when the direct approach doesn't work, right, which just saying no or saying, please don't ask me that anymore, or any of those kind of things, you also have the opportunity to spend less time with those people. So audit the people that you're surrounding yourself with and do something about it because you have more control over the people you surround yourself with than you think you do. So Let's talk about control, right? Because the truth is we have less control than we think we do, but we have more control than we use. All right? So think about that. We have less control than you think, but we have more control than we actually use. So you are not powerless in any of these situations. Taking control, taking power gives you that ownership and it allows you a level of autonomy. So the key is to identify what you can control, what you can't, and let go of the things that you can't and focus on the things that you can, because we waste an enormous amount of time and emotional energy beating our head against a wall, trying to control people, things, actions that are just not in our power to impact. So instead, let that stuff go quickly and redirect that energy on the things that you can control, which are your direct enforcement and your indirect enforcement. Because guess what? You do not have to spend time with people who stress you out or treat you badly or say shitty things. You do not have to stay in jobs that are toxic. You do not have to stay in relationships where you are miserable. So you actually have the power to change those things. Will that be difficult? Will that be hard? Absolutely. Is that a reason not to change them? No, because you only have one life and that's it. It is not worth being in places and with people that cost your physical, mental, and emotional health more than they give back to it. It's just not. So be honest with yourself about it and take action, right? That leads us to this last piece of it, which is take imperfect action. Don't wait, just start a little at a time. And you start by figuring out why you're protecting your time. You start by figuring out what you want your attention on and how you want to be treated. Write that down so you can refer back to it whenever you feel unsure. And then you can create those scripts to help you do that direct enforcement. And again, if you have any specific situations where you want scripts, send them to me and I will write you. I'll write you a couple. I'll write you as many as you want, right? Any situation that comes up for you that you need a script, just DM me and I'll write you. So recognize what you do and do not have control over and just start by taking that imperfect action. All right. So as a quick recap, we talked about reassessing your enforcement strategy with direct and indirect ways of enforcement, because both of those things are instrumental. We talked about identifying what you do and do not have control over, and then taking action, imperfect action, to address those things. So let me know how it goes. I want you to try it out. I know it's hard, right? Boundaries bump up against so many things for us. And I think we're going to do a further discussion on this around what some of those emotional things that boundaries bump up against, because I think that you find, I mean, I know that I find that sometimes I set a boundary and then I'll find myself having conversations with myself about, well, do I even have the right to set that boundary? Like I start second guessing my own boundaries, right? Like there's just shit that goes on in our head around our boundaries. And there's a lot of worries about like, what's the implication of setting that boundary? What's the consequence of setting that boundary? And like how we manage all that stuff that's going on for ourselves. There's a lot to unpack there. So I think we're having a further conversation about that stuff too, is like, how do you get into the weeds emotionally a little bit and navigate some of either that self-talk or some of that indecision around those stories that you're telling yourself around your boundaries. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I want you to go back and take these steps and see how it helps you and let me know. All right? It's good to see you, and I'll see you next week.